හරිම සුදුයි.
Tonight on First at 9 this Wednesday, the 17th of January 2024. Brighter days. Revenue collection will be revamped under the new program to boost economic recovery, says the President. Litro lit up. The government calls for EOIs for the divestiture of Litrogas Lanka Limited and Litrogas Terminal Lanka. Supreme decisions. The Supreme Court declares the presidential pardon granted for Duminda Silva invalid. Strike to strike. The token strike of the Health Trade Union concludes. The Government Nursing Officers Association, however, launches another strike.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟමැති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and a warm welcome to today's edition of AdaDerana's English News. First at 9, this is Jonathan Benedict. Let's take a look at our news for the evening, starting with our top story right now. President Ranil Wickremesinghe says that Sri Lanka will revamp all of its revenue collection system under the current program as another initiative to boost the government's revenue recovery of the country. Joining a panel discussion in the 54th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, President Wickremesinghe also said that the government is looking to boost foreign direct investments and is not willing to obtain loans going forward. The President also stressed the goal for Sri Lanka to expeditiously graduate to being a net energy exporter in the face of increasingly adverse climate change effects. Addressing a panel discussion during his official tour to Switzerland to attend the 54th annual meeting of the World Economic Forum, President Ranil Wickremesinghe commented on Sri Lanka's outlook following the debt restructuring program.
So what is the outlook for Sri Lanka after its debt relief?
I must say we have performed well so far, and for the first time we've got positive growth. I would expect about 2% growth this year and maybe on to about 4 or 5 next year. The main issue we have is how do you repay this, because we've had a balance of payment issue. We have a question of budgetary issues also. Revenue is not enough for the expenditure. We are also revamping our total revenue collection systems, and we want to have a revenue authority replacing the individual departments. Balance of payments concerned is how we attract new investments and what are the areas. We have a fair amount of solar and wind power far beyond our needs. How do you utilize it at the moment when there's a demand, and we are also going to sell part of it to India. But you have a bigger problem here. One is populism. You have the expectations of the people that have to be met, and most of us are living beyond our means, if you look at it in the conventional way. Then your bond markets, others are at the moment have to operate on the conventional rules. Now, how do you have these two together? If you are going to apply the strict rules, all governments will collapse. In my view, you have got to sit down and take a view on this. How are we going to do it? Otherwise, this issue will go on. Your government must, at the end of the day, provide minimum facility that's expected. I mean, it's not so bad for us. We got into this problem because we took the loans on non-tradable goods. No way of paying back, but all our villagers today have paved roads, we have better buildings in schools. You have to resolve these issues in Sri Lanka. We can manage it.
Just on this idea that you say Sri Lanka can achieve this, so talk about revenue collection, you're talking about taxes on households and businesses, you have an IMF schema. Do you think this will breed any seeds of resentment among Sri Lankan populations later on, or you think the country...
We've already had foreign investments. It's nothing new. Basically, from the time the Dutch came, they were investing. Then the British invested. Now we are investing. So in any case, we can live with foreign investment, and people are expecting foreign investment. So it's an open society. That's not a major issue for us. We think we want to make it on our own, but we don't want to add any more burdens.
Meanwhile, President Ranil Wickremesinghe, addressing the roundtable organized by the Climate Vulnerable Forum in Switzerland yesterday, noted that he is dedicated to progressing investments in climate prosperity plans, including the development of investor sheets for finance mobilization.
while making little or no contribution to the global carbon footprint. Vulnerable developing nations in the global south face the brunt of the adverse impact of climate change. Multilateral efforts to redress this balance has been high on commitments and low on outcome. It is with this issue of climate justice in mind that Sri Lanka launched the Tropical Belt Initiative at COP28 in Dubai. In order to identify avenues for such investments, developing countries must identify robust plans and bankable projects. Sri Lanka's Climate Prosperity Plan provides that blueprint for investment in critical areas, including in resource-based sectors to secure our industries and supply chains. The targeted intervention proposed in our CPP is grounded in our national circumstances and aims to unlock domestic energy abundance through renewables for the country to become a net energy exporter by 2025. The CPP investments, once realized, will boost Sri Lanka's renewable energy production, ideally exceeding 100% of domestic power needs by 2040.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe also participated in a roundtable discussion organised by the Consortium of Indian Industry and the World Economic Forum yesterday. During the discussions, the President emphasised the successful resolution of supply bottlenecks, the removal of import restrictions and the restoration of foreign exchange liquidity as key factors contributing to sustained economic growth. President Wickremesinghe welcomed private investments, particularly in infrastructure development and the divestment of state-owned enterprises.
This is what we hope to plan out. We think there has to be an integration of Sri Lanka and India's economies, and that can take place. In case for 1,000 years, we have been trading with each other. That's no secret at all. There's large amount of transaction which goes on between Colombo and Chennai, Colombo and Mumbai, as all of you know, partly official, partly unofficial. So I would like to, if you have any questions, both the Sri Lankan delegation and I are here to clarify it for you.
Speaking of debt restructuring, the Sri Lankan government has called for expressions of interest for the divestiture of Litrogas Lanka Limited and Litrogas Terminal Lanka. According to the state-owned enterprises restructuring unit, the divestiture is slated to be complete through a two-stage competitive bidding process with Deloitte Touche Tomatsu India LLP serving as the transaction advisor. Under the divestment plan of Sri Lanka's state-owned enterprises, the Sri Lankan government has called for expressions of interest from intrigued parties and have issued an invitation to access the request for expression of interest document from the government's treasury website for the divestment of Litrogas Lanka and Litrogas Terminal Lanka. With a market share of 85%, Litrogas Lanka is the largest supplier of liquefied petroleum gas in Sri Lanka and engages in the import, filling, distribution and sale of LPG within the country. Litrogas Lanka operates an LPG filling plant in Keravalapitia with a filling capacity of 1,600 metric tons per day, while a second filling plant located at Marbima is under construction. Litrogas Terminal Lanka, on the other hand, provides bulk storage and pipeline facilities for LPG, with their key storage facility strategically located in Keravalapitia with a capacity of 8,000 metric tons. Worthy to note is the availability of surplus land at Keravalapitia for further expansion of both LGL and LGTL. This divestiture will be implemented via the state-owned enterprise restructuring unit and Deloitte Touche Tomatsu India LLP, who have been appointed the transaction advisor. The divestiture is slated to be completed through a two-stage competitive bidding process. In other news, the Supreme Court today declared invalid former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa's decision to grant a presidential pardon to former MP Duminda Silva, who was convicted and sentenced to death over the murder of Bharata Lakshman Premachandra. The relevant court order was issued by a three-judge bench of the Supreme Court when the case pertaining to several petitions filed by the late Premachandra's wife and daughter, Sumana and Hirunika Premachandra, and former Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission of Sri Lanka, Ghazali Hussain, challenging the legality of the presidential pardon that was taken up for hearing. The Supreme Court proceeded to instruct the Commissioner General of Prisons to take relevant measures necessary so as to reimpose the impending sentence against Duminda Silva.
In September 2016, the Colombo High Court found former parliamentarian Duminda Silva and 4 others guilty over the death of former parliamentarian Bharata Lakshman Premachandra and 3 of his supporters during a shootout that took place in Mullaria in October 2011 during the local government election and was subsequently sentenced to death. 5 years later, on the 24th of June 2021, Duminda Silva was granted a presidential pardon by former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa. In July of the same year, fundamental rights petitions were filed by daughter of late former MP Bharatha Lakshman Premachandra, Hirunika Premachandra, his spouse Sumana Premachandra, and former Commissioner of the Human Rights Commission, Attorney at Law Ghazali Hussain, challenging the legality of the presidential pardon granted by former President Gotabaya Rajapaksa to former MP Duminda Silva. On May 2022, the Supreme Court ordered the suspension of the presidential pardon granted to Duminda Silva, and he was arrested following day on admittance to Sri Jayawardhanapura Hospital, citing a sudden illness. This morning, the case was taken up for hearing once again before a three-member bench of the Supreme Court, comprising Justices Preeti Padman Surasena, Gamini Amarasekara and Arjun Obesekara. During the hearing, the justices observed that there is a due process to be followed prior to the grant of presidential pardon to a convict per provisions in Article 34(1) of the Constitution, which includes calling for a report from the justices who name the suspect a convict, then forwarding the report for reference to the Attorney General, upon which the stance of the Attorney General is informed to the Minister of Justice, and finally a compiled report by the subject minister including his recommendations pertaining to the matter to the President. The justices held that the President can proceed to decide whether the pardon is granted or not once the said process is completed. As such, the justices remarked that the former President failed to follow due procedure. Further, the justices pointed out that the President exploited his power, neglecting the provisions within the Constitution. Highlighting how questionable it was for the former President to only select Duminda Silva out of the list of convicts who were given the death penalty, the justices stated that it is visible that the former President selected him based on friendship and political commitment, resulting in a loss of public confidence in criminal justice system of the country. Concluding, the three-member judge bench instructed the Commissioner General of Prisons to take relevant measures to impose the impending sentence against Duminda Silva.
As the token strike launched by 72 health trade unions was called off this morning, the Government Nursing Officers Association initiated a 24-hour token strike commencing from 7 a.m. today, requesting that the DAT allowance of 35,000 rupees given to state doctors be given to them as well. However, and thankfully, amidst the ongoing trade union strike, daily operations in hospitals continued as usual without any hindrance. Following unsuccessful deliberations with the Acting Minister of Finance, Shehan Semasinga, last evening, the 24-hour token strike launched by members affiliated to 72 health trade unions ended at 8 this morning. The Triforce's personnel deployed in hospitals to ensure continuous medical operations vacated the hospital premises today following the resumption of uninterrupted medical services provided to the general public. In the meantime, a tense situation was observed at the Karapitiya Teaching Hospital today. This stressful situation arose between the junior staff of the hospital, which engaged in the trade union action yesterday, and the medical specialist of the cancer department. In the light of the token strike that ended this morning, the Government Nursing Officers Association initiated an island-wide 24-hour token strike commencing at 7 a.m. today, demanding an allowance of 35,000 rupees in line with the DAT allowance provided to state doctors.
අපි ඊයේ දිනේදී සෞඛ්‍ය අමාත්‍යවරයා සමග සාකච්ඡා කරා මුදල් රාජ්‍ය අමාත්‍යවරයා සමග සාකච්ඡා කරා එහිදී අපි අපේ යෝජනාවල ඉදිරිපත් කරා අපට පිළිගත හැකි විසඳුමක් අපට හම්බුන්නේ නැහැ. එම නිසා ඊයේ දිනේදී වෘත්තීය සංගම් 72ක් මේ වෘත්තීය ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය සමග රැඳී සිටියා. අද දිනේ ඒකේ දිගුවක් විදියට තමයි හෙද නිලධාරීන් එහි බැටන් එක අතර ගත්තේ.
දැන් ඇයි සමන් රත්නප්පිය මහත්තයගේ මේ වෘත්තීය සමිතිය ඇයි මේ වැඩ වර්ජනයට යොමු වුණේ?
මෙහි අවසාන වෘත්තීය ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය තෝරනු ලබන්නේ විධායක සභාව විසින්.
කල් මරන්න එපා. වෛද්‍ය සේවාවට මේ කටයුත්ත බොහොම ඉක්මනින් කරන්න පුළුවන් වුණා නම් අනිකුත් සේවාවන් සඳහා සාධාරණීෂ්ඨ කරන්න.
However, amidst the ongoing strike, daily operations at hospitals proceeded without any hindrance. The All Ceylon Nurses Union and the Public Services United Nurses Union did not join the nurses strike today.
අපිට විධිමත් සාකච්ඡාවක් ලැබිලා තිබුණා සෞඛ්‍ය ලේකම්වරයා සමග. ඒ අනුව අද දිනේ අපි ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න තිබුණු ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය අත්හිටවලා තිබෙනවා. දේශපාලන වාසි ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා ආණ්ඩුවට හිතවත් වෘත්තීය සමිති අධ්‍යක්ෂ ජනරාල්වරුත් එකතු වෙලා මේ කරන ක්‍රියාමාර්ගය පරාජය කරන්න එකතු වෙන්න කියන එකත් අපි සමස්ත සෞඛ්‍ය සේවකයන්ගෙනුත් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා.
The dispensation of medicines continued unhindered at the Children's Hospital, the Cancer Hospital, the Maternity Hospital, the Kidney Treatment Hospital, the Central Blood Bank and the Mental Health Institute. The Government Nursing Officers Association, however, launched a protest in front of the Maligawath Kidney Hospital this afternoon. Concurrently, several parties expressed their views on the Government Nursing Officers Association strike, led by the Director General of Trade Unions to President, Saman Ratnapriya.
සමන් රත්නප්‍රිය මහත්තයාගේ යුනියන් එකත් උතන ඉන්නවා.
අද ඉන්නේ එයා විතරයි. ඉතින් මුකුත් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද සමන් රත්නප්‍රිය කියන්නේ ජනාධිපතිගේ තනතුරු මුක්ති විඳින්මින් සාමාජිකයනොත් ගුණාට අන්තකන වර්ජනවල් රැලිවල්ට එකතු කරන්නත් දෙකක් බෑ. ඒ හින්දා මම සමන්රත්න ප්‍රියගෙන් ඉල්ලා සිටිනවා දෙකින් එකක් තෝරගන්න. අපි සහාය දෙන්නම් ඒ එකට ඔයාට.
Speaking of protests, police on numerous occasions this afternoon fired water cannons to disperse protesters of the Inter-University Students' Federation, or IUSF, in several parts of Colombo. The IUSF carried out a protest march today accusing the government of slashing student grants and residential facilities provided at universities. In addition, the protest action was carried out despite the court order issued by the Maligakanda Magistrates Court barring the Inter-University Students' Federation from inconveniencing the public.
A protest march was organised by the Inter-University Students' Federation this afternoon near the Sri Jayawardhanapura University. The IUSF organised the protest march accusing the government of slashing student grants and residential facilities provided at the universities. This comes against the Maligakanda Magistrates Court's issuance of an order barring the Inter-University Students' Federation from inconveniencing the public during their protest march this afternoon. The order issued by the courts prevented the protesters from carrying out demonstrations near the Vihara Mahadevi Park in Cinnamon Gardens and towards the Lipton roundabout, and included the commencement of the protest march near the Science City Cinema as it proceeded towards the Fort Railway Station. The court order as such was handed over to the protesters by a police officer.
පස් දෙනෙකුගෙන් හෝ ඊට වැඩි ගණනකින් යුක්ත වූ රැස්වීම් සමාජිකයන් ලෙස කටයුතු කරන නුඹලා සියලු දෙනාට වහාම විසිර යන ලෙසට.
In a bid to disperse the protesters, the police later fired tear gas and water cannons at the protesters marching towards the Vijayarama Junction. Security forces continued to fire tear gas and water cannons at the protesters who were visibly unsettled by the show of force. This resulted in a tense situation that arose as the protesters in turn counter-attacked the security forces.
Welcome back. Sri Lanka's Purchasing Managers Index for the month of December recorded an index value of 52.7 from 57 a month earlier, driven down by seasonal factors. The service sector PMI for the month of December showed an index value of 58.9, indicating a continued expansion in services activities. The Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index recorded an index value of 52.7 for the month of December. The central bank said that the index was driven by increases in new orders and production in the manufacture of the food and beverages sector with seasonal demand. However, new orders and production in the manufacture of textiles and the apparel sector declined during the month, which mainly contributed to the decline in employment as well. Meanwhile, stock of purchases increased during the month due to the increase in production and new orders. Further, suppliers' delivery time continued to lengthen in December. The overall expectation for manufacturing activity remains positive for the next 3 months. However, firms are concerned about the impact of tax revisions from January 2024 and the shipping disruptions due to the unrest in the Red Sea. On a global level, manufacturing PMI recorded a value of 49 in December 2023, with a decrease of 0.3 index points from November. Manufacturing PMIs of China and Russia improved at a higher pace in December 2023, while India and Singapore showed a slower rate. Manufacturing PMIs of the Eurozone, the UK and the USA deteriorated in December of 2023 compared to the previous month. In the services sector, PMI recorded an index value of 58.9 in December 2023, with an accelerated emergence of new businesses. New businesses increased in December 2023 compared to November of 2023, particularly with the increases observed in wholesale and retail trade, financial services, insurance, other personal service activities, and accommodation and the food and beverages subsectors. Business activities continue to expand in November 2023, showing positive development in several subsectors. Meanwhile, employment declined despite some new recruitments made to meet seasonal demand, while backlogs of work also continue to
decline during December. On a global level, the services PMI posted 51.6 in December 2023, signaling an expansion in global services activities. Services Purchasing Managers Indices of China, India, the US and Japan indicated that their service sectors expanded in December 2023 compared to the previous month.
The Colombo Stock Exchange closed lower today for the 7th straight session, its longest losing streak since late April of 2023, as every sector except for healthcare recorded losses. The CSE All Share Price Index closed 0.6% down at 10,480.29 points, while the S&P SL20 edged lower 0.84% to close at 2,974.03 points. Lanka Milk Foods PLC and Expo Lanka Holdings PLC were the top losers, falling 90.6% and 1.6% respectively. Trading volume on the index fell to 31.6 million shares from 37.6 million shares in the previous session. Equity market turnover fell to 802.8 million rupees from 1.58 billion rupees in the previous session. The insurance sector was the top contributor to market turnover today, while the diversified financial sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net sellers, offloading stocks worth 352.9 million rupees, while domestic investors were net buyers, purchasing shares worth 782.4 million rupees. We now have Udishan Jonas from Capital Alliance with some thoughts on the current state of the economy of the country in our next segment, Sri Lanka's Economic Outlook.
On this week's economic news, we saw the weekly average rated prime lending rate remained flat at 11.86%, despite an improvement in market liquidity, where the market liquidity improved to a deficit of 55 billion versus an 88 billion deficit a week ago. From an overall interest rate perspective, we feel that the lending rates are kind of bottoming out, while there is more scope for treasury bill rates to come down further. Particularly at this week's auction, we saw the 3-month treasury bill rates fall by 35 basis points, falling to 13.91%, which is the first time we've seen rates falling down below 14% for a while the 1-year treasury bill only fell by 1 basis points at this week's auction. Overall, we are seeing the yield curve kind of correcting itself, where the short-term rates are falling and while the long-term rates are holding at almost the current levels. From a fiscal perspective, the good news is that Sri Lanka is making progress on the privatization front, where 3 bidders have expressed interest for Sri Lanka Telecom, which will mean that the conclusion of the deal will take 3 to 5 months from today to reach conclusion. And this will improve Sri Lanka's balance of payment position, given that most of the interest has been made by foreign bidders, and will also help Sri Lanka reduce its debt burden from the proceeds that they get from the sales of some of these SOEs that they are willing to sell. From a inflation perspective, we saw vegetable prices increase almost by 100% week on week, which will negate the 3% electricity tariff benefit that the government is willing to pass on to consumers. From a fiscal perspective, also the IMF delegation is down in Sri Lanka this week, and a few areas that they have highlighted of importance is fast-tracking the property taxes, working on the private partnership laws, making changes to electricity tariffs, and also improving the bank recapitalizations 2024. From an external perspective, we've seen the currency appreciate over the last 2 to 3 weeks and currently stands at 321 rupees to the dollar. Tourism arrivals are helping towards a larger part in terms of improving our external position, with the first 2 weeks or 15 days of January seeing roughly 100,000 tourist arrivals coming to Sri Lanka.
With that, let's take a look at how the rupee exchange rates changed during the course of the day today. Baraka Naturals recently achieved the Best Exporter Award in the Herbal and Ayurvedic category at the 25th Presidential Exports Awards held by the Export Development Board. Meanwhile, Lanka Special Steels Limited 2 secured 4 prestigious gold awards and 1 bronze award at the National Convention on Quality and Productivity Awards 2023. With that, let's take a look at the corporate sector news for the day.
A prominent leader in black seed oil and herbal product manufacturing, Baraka recently achieved the Best Exporter Award in the Herbal and Ayurveda category at the 25th Presidential Export Awards held by the Export Development Board. This award celebrates Baraka's dedication to exporting top-quality herbal and Ayurvedic products and coincides with the 30th anniversary of bioextracts. The award further recognizes the team's efforts in overcoming challenges and maintaining international success. Meanwhile, Lanka Special Steels Limited announced exceptional achievement at the National Convention on Quality and Productivity Awards 2023. During the event, the Lanka Special Steels Limited was recognized with 4 prestigious gold awards and 1 bronze award. In addition, Lanka Special Steels Limited's success in the continuous improvement category showcased the company's dedication to operational excellence and was represented by its cross-functional teams, outshining over 400 teams across various categories. In other news, Satasa Motors PLC recently announced the appointment of Srimal Nilash Fernando as a non-independent executive director of the company effective from the 15th of January this year. In its corporate disclosure, the company further added that the newly appointed director does not have a relevant interest in shares issued by the company as of date.
That's all the news I have for you for now. Join us again tomorrow. For now, this is Jonathan Benedict. Have a good night and a blessed Thursday ahead.